All right, we're live for our morning coffee chat. I'm excited to have a good friend and someone I also really look up to in the industry, Mr. Micah Davidson, who I've known when he was an agent a long time ago when I was booking shows at the Plaza Live, and we've remained friends through almost 15 years now or so, maybe 16
Possibly
years.
more, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just been really cool to watch your journey from being an agent to starting Midwood Entertainment and all the amazing things that you've done, how much the company has grown from being a booking agency to now having a venue division, festival division, and so much more. I'll give you. We've done a podcast before. It's very long, so I'll drop that link in the description. But so if anybody wants, here's the origin story and the backstory of Micah. But uh, give everyone a brief overview who you are and what Micah what Midwood Entertainment is.
Well, first off, thanks so much, Chris, for inviting me. We, as you said, we've been friends for years and years, so it's always it's nice when we get to catch up in general, but it's always an honor when you reach out and ask me to be part of these things. Yeah, I'm Micah Davidson. I'm in Midwood Entertainment. We started it in September of 2015, so getting ready to celebrate our 10-year anniversary in a few months. We started as an agency, a booking agency representing artists as well as producing some events, and that grew into having a true needing to, as we continue to grow, we had more opportunities pop up with different concepts, and so we diversified into multiple divisions. So we have an artist division, which represents our talent still that we handle the touring for. We have a venue division. We have 11 venues throughout the country that we program, 2 of which we also operate. Those 2 spaces are the Harvester in Rocky Mount, Virginia, and the Amp Ballantine, which is an amphitheater in Charlotte, North Carolina. And then we've got a festival division and where we do big outdoor festivals and big concert series. And I own a staging company and own 2 mobile stages, as well as, though it's not formally announced, we also have a venue consulting division where we consult on operations as well as venue design, and just picked up a couple clients for that. So that's kind of a quick overview. So yeah, we do a bunch of stuff.
So I have some questions that I prepared, but one of the things that a lot of my students always want to know about is producing festivals. Before I started teaching, or when I first started teaching, when I inherited the assignments they had, us always create a hypothetical event, and the budgets were completely unrealistic. They all wanted to produce the next Lollapalooza or Bonnaroo or Coachella, and I was like, you have to start from a more realistic place, and that's when I completely changed everything. I was like, you can't learn this from a textbook. You can't learn it by doing a presentation. Let's just produce events for real. And these are small scale events, but all of them are obviously very curious about the festival world. It's very appealing to college students. So I guess first question of those in the festival world is, I guess, where does anybody start? Like if someone wants to work festivals and be part of the whole experience. I know there's so many different areas within the festivals. I guess talk about some of the different areas they could start, and where does someone with very little to no experience get started?
Well, I know this is going to sound a little cheeky, but I would say everybody sort of starts at the beginning, and I mean that seriously. Like, don't overthink the process of how to get into something. Right. The first thing to do is do like you would in any other situation. Just start reaching out. Start finding contact information. Whether it is, if you're lucky enough to have somebody if you're lucky enough to either have a Polestar account or know somebody who does, which is certainly an industry thing, you can start reaching out and looking for contacts. You can follow certain bands, start reaching out to them, literally offer them opportunities. Even if you don't technically work for the festival, but you literally work for an artist who you become friends with or you really like, and you say, hey, you're going to be in my town. Do you need help with anything? Can I help load in? Can I help do this? Can I help do that? Would you like me to come out and take pictures? Whatever it may be. Just getting your foot in the door is always the most important thing. I would certainly go to festivals, and if you're serious about being part of the industry, then I wouldn't go to the festival as a pure enjoyment scenario, meaning like go to the festival, talk to your security guards, Go to the festival, talk to other volunteers who are already working, see if they have opportunities. There's usually, especially in a volunteer scenario, a lot of people plan and schedule high on the volunteers, and then 90% of the time volunteers don't show up. So there could be opportunity where you can jump in and truly help with something right then and there. Don't talk to anybody you can find in a crowd, whether they be a staff person, whether it be a volunteer, whether it be literally somebody who is just affiliated with everything. Sorry. It's just being present and asking questions, going ahead and putting yourself out there. I find is usually the place to start, and getting involved with, again, some of it depends on what do you want to do. If you want to be the person who actually produces festivals, I wouldn't do it if you've never been in the industry before. I certainly wouldn't do it without working some events, really trying to work your way up in the channel of communication, not necessarily as work your way up from being just a volunteer and take however many years it's going to get to be the event producer or the event producer's assistant, but figure out how to have as many conversations as possible and be around people who do it, and see if you can figure out how to just sit in on planning meetings and things like that, and so you can start gaining knowledge. But if you're going to do it and you really don't have any experience, the best thing I can tell you to do is find a way to hire people who do know what they're talking about. I realize every time I touch my desk, my camera's shaking. It's really important to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward. So
yeah, I love that. I love the whole just talking to people at the festival, right? Meeting everyone. And I often say, like, every town has local bands, and just like find a way to start helping the local bands. And I love that you've mentioned like taking photos, like, ask them how they all probably need help with merch. They all need help with social media content, and they all need help. A drummer would love some help with load in and load out, for sure.
Yeah.
So I love that. For the introverts out there, I always tell them I'm an introvert too, and you got to push yourself, right? But do you have any advice on some icebreakers and like how to get conversations started with some people at venues? Because like they're busy, right? So like an introvert is probably a lot more aware of like them just running around and they don't want to bother them. And then on the other side too, the extrovert, especially when they're really extroverted, they sometimes may not pick up on context cues, right? when someone is too busy and they're like, don't bother them. Any advice on like conversation starters and knowing how to navigate that and who to talk to?
Well, ironically, I consider myself an introvert who masks as an extrovert, which I think is has its challenges as that stands as well. But the reality is that which I have to always remind myself, and at the end of the day, like, it takes energy to have a conversation, and I understand that. But if you can't figure out how to put yourself out there to just, hey man, how are you? Do you need a bottle of water? Can I get you anything? Like, I realize you're standing here working this post. I'm not trying to ask for anything. I'm not curious to get backstage or this, that, whatever, but I'd be more than happy to get you a bottle of water if you need it. Hey, do you have a couple minutes where I could ask you just a couple of questions? I'm curious about the industry. I know you're a security guard. You may or may not know a lot of planning about what's going on, but any ideas that you might be able to share. I at the end of the day, yes, be mindful of if somebody is too busy and ask them so. Like, don't be afraid. Don't wait for somebody to give you a cue that says I'm too busy or I'm available to talk to. Go up and ask somebody, hey man, this is this, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Are you busy at the moment? Can I talk to you about stuff? I know you're watching this story. I feel like we're sort of focusing on security guards, but you can walk up to the merch booth and ask the same questions. Like, hey, is there a slower time where I can come back and ask you some questions about whatever's going on? Is there a coordinator that I could talk to about something? Who are other people that I can talk with? Just asking basic questions, just anything to get started. Hey man, what's your name? Like, it doesn't take much to start a conversation. I understand that at the end of the day, it's putting yourself out there. It's not really the issue especially for an introvert, is not what is the right question to ask. It's them having enough courage to being able to go up and talk to anybody that they want to talk to.
Mhm.
What I would say is that remember that none of this is personal. This is a business conversation, right? And you may gain a personal relationship with somebody you start working with, but the reality is that you need to figure out the difference between a personal conversation and a professional one. And I have found that it's much easier for me to go into professional conversations a lot of times
Mhm.
than it even
Nice.
is to go into personal ones, you
Mhm.
know, um, because I either take away something, I either learn something or or I don't,
Sure.
and most of the time you're learning something, even if it's what not to do.
Right.
But everything's about trial and error.
Yeah, I love that. We have our first question. Nicole French, who's been watching for about a week now, and reached out to me on LinkedIn, and she wants to get into the whole live event world and festival world. I believe it's festival world she wants to get into, but has a lot of experience. So is new to touring and the live music side. But Nicole has worked on events and some presidential campaigns, and I'm sure that's been some very high profile stuff she's done there. But yeah, her question is for anyone that's listening on the audio later. What are some other ways to connect with people when you don't have the money to attend and travel to festivals and events?
Similar kind of what you're doing right now, which is, and I don't know, Nicole, if you're asking this question for the world, since it sounds like you've been affiliated with some different things, or if you're asking this for yourself. But I think there are lots of different ways to make yourself present. Being a part of something like this and asking those questions, being paying attention to where people are commenting online, paying attention to whether it be LinkedIn, whether it be social media, whatever it may be, commenting on a YouTube video. There's lots and lots of different places where you can ask questions where you don't have to be present, like physically present, to be able to do so. It's certainly challenging, and the reality is, and I understand that everybody's got their different financial, situations and so on. Anybody is always going to get out of something whatever they're willing to put into it. So one of the things I will say is I'll always sort of think about this, uh, be thinking about the stuff that you are investing your money in and figuring out, does it make sense for me to go out to the bar with my friends for 5 or 6 days, or can I hold on to that money and use it to go buy a concert ticket? In which case I can now go, have an opportunity to be present and go talk to somebody. I know that makes it more about the money. And the question you're asking is obviously, what if you don't have any money? But still, at some point, you've got to figure out how to invest in the goals of your life. So I think you need to evaluate where you spend your money and stuff like that as well to make sure you have those opportunities. But in general, I think getting online and finding message boards and social media and stuff like that, and trying to be what I lovingly call a ninja in the industry, and comment on everybody, try and read between the lines on different comments and figure out where people may seem to be affiliated with different events. Somebody who attends a lot of events, even if it's somebody who attends lots of events, chances are if they attend a lot of events, they might know other people in the industry, because they spend so much time around it. So there's usually a way to connect to people one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. Is there any kind of training that you like that could be helpful, right? So like we talked earlier about just like learning how to take photos and take video of stuff, but one thing I always talk about, I mean, there's obviously the OSHA certifications if you want to get into productions, or in production, and then not financially a supporter, but they have donated their studio to record the first course of the program that I'm launching actually later this year. But LMG has a division called the Coil Learning Center, and they do free stagehand boot camps. I mean, it is with the intention to hire people and find workers, but they're all over the country. Orlando, Nashville, Vegas, and a couple other areas that I saw. But they offer these weekends boot camps where you learn everything about being a stagehand, which is a really great resource. And if anyone's interested, I have a whole list of resources. But anything that you like seeing or have noticed that people like seeing, any kind of additional training people can get?
I'm going to go ahead and say no. And clearly, I need to do better research myself on making sure that those are opportunities. I try to pride myself in being somebody who offers opportunity to teach. We have interns every summer for the company, and I try and spend as much time as possible being as forthcoming as possible with as much content. If somebody's going to be an intern for us, again, I want them to get the experience, everything that they put into it. So I 100%, uh, pull the curtain back and let them literally see budgeting and how do we go through that process, and be part of planning meetings and be part of strategy meetings and sit in on everything, and ask them questions and make sure that they're asking us questions, and that there's opportunity to learn. I should spend more time looking at what other resources, so that way if it's something that we don't have the time to help with, that we can point more people in the in other directions.
Sure.
So I'm gonna go ahead and say, admittedly, that I'm gonna fall short on that answer.
And we still have you still mentioned some other skills that people can develop and learn, right? And it's always marketing skills and just learning about the industry in general, as you mentioned, like watching things like this and being part of things like this.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that some friends of mine and I have talked about, and I feel like you and I have probably talked about this in the past, but why is this not? I just got a text. That's weird. I'm going to do not disturb. But anyway, me and some friends have been thinking about this for years. We've never, unfortunately, we haven't really found the time to be able to do it. And I wish more people would. But our whole lives, let's be honest, when we are growing up, we get into elementary school and we start working our way towards college. Everything that is music oriented from a teaching standpoint is all about performance, right? So it's not until we either get to college or even after college that we start learning about the aspect of, you can be a lawyer in the industry, you can do marketing, you can literally be a stagehand, you can learn rigging, you can do marketing, you can be graphic designer, branding ambassador, there's all kinds of stuff that you can do, a parking expert, logistics, side ops, talent buying, artist management, artist representation, all of these different types of things. And I wish that there was more opportunity. You mentioned that you were doing this in your class, in one of your classes, when you were teaching, where you guys decided to go ahead and produce, small scale or not, you were producing your own event. Mm-hmm. And I think that is something that's incredibly important to go ahead and start learning and teaching at a much younger age. I think, certainly things worked out okay for me, but I felt I was asked to leave the first time I tried college, and I dropped out the second time I tried college. And so, but I think my parents would have certainly been, no matter, they were incredibly supportive already, but they were, I think parents as a whole would be more supportive in general about art, about kids getting into the music industry if they realized all of the different other aspects of the industry that you can make a living. Making a living as a musician is very difficult. Mm-hmm. Making a living in the industry is difficult, but understanding that there's way more options out there than just being a musician, is I think is something that isn't spoken about enough, and certainly at an early enough age to give as many options as possible.
So you mentioned a trigger word for students earlier, internships. Tell me about the internships that y'all offer. You said summer. What do you look for in an intern? Is there anything on a resume that can stand out, right? Because you're probably going to get a bunch of resumes, and you have to filter through them. Is there something that you look for as you're filtering through resumes that you add to the pile? Okay, let me look at these again later, and then what stands out to actually get an interview for an internship?
Well, I try to make sure that it's somebody who is truly looking for music industry experience. At the end of the day, like an intern, 90% of the time is super green in the industry, right? So I'm not looking for somebody who is got an incredible resume with all of these events behind them and so on and so on. If that were the way the resume read and they was looking for an internship, there's probably a red flag in there somewhere, right? So interns are usually looking to gain experience. They're either doing it truly for college credit, or they are doing it because they've graduated and they're really interested in the industry. But I want to see that the programs that they're in college has somewhat geared them towards, this industry. There's no point. I don't want to waste their time any more than I want them to waste hours. And those are usually the things I look for. at the end of the day, when we do our interviews, I'm always mindful of personality. I know we talked about introvert versus extrovert a little bit ago, and by no means do I want this to sound harsh or anything like that. I can't teach personality, right? I can fundamentally teach somebody how to do anything that they want to learn in the music industry in a few hours. I can't teach personality, and I can't teach work ethic or drive, right? I can try and inspire as best I possibly can, but at the end of the day, you're either somebody who truly wants to be in this industry, and you're going to blood, sweat, and tear it, until you find a way to, as a friend of mine says, believe it until you achieve it, but I look for an opportunity for us to have a mutual beneficial opportunity for each other, so it's not as much the resume. I mean, I want the resume to me is like, okay, you've done some stuff in college, you were part of the student union and you helped with some events and this, that, whatever. But in college is not necessarily one thing that I'm looking for, because at the end of the day, they're super young and they're looking for experience.
Sure. I mean, those are definitely great points. The program they're in, right? As long as it shows some interest in the industry, like if you're in an engineering major, I think it's engineering major, but I was going to build the stages. I don't know, but if you're like an engineering major, maybe not so much. But if you're in entertainment, music, marketing, like any major that's somewhat relevant to the industry, and then you mentioned like the student groups, right? If you're part of student groups, I mean, that shows interest. I mean, it's hard to get experience right out of the gate, but if there's anything that shows interest, I've had students that created their own paths, right? It would either start a podcast or a blog, or they would start like a concert photography thing just so they're in it, as things you mentioned earlier. So I love all that. Nicole has another question. And Nicole, if you want to mention like what area of the country maybe you're in, but that's might help with context to this, but would like to go in touring, is it better to start at a venue? I don't live in a large music town, so would likely have to move to a city with larger venues.
I don't know if that's necessarily true. I don't live in a music town on any level. I live in a decent size. I just found out yesterday, ironically, that Charlotte is now, I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we are the Alabama is a lovely, lovely little state. And I've done some work down there as well. But sorry, for whatever reason, my do not disturb is not working. I'm still getting some text messages. It's a little distracting. So I think if you're in Alabama, what I would say is not necessarily, some of it depends on what city you're in, for sure. I don't think you have to be in a music town to necessarily get into touring. I think a lot of it is, again, putting yourself out there. Some of it depends on what level of touring are you hoping to jump into. Do you have enough experience and you've been around it enough that you want to be able to, you want to get into touring and you want to, quote unquote, go take over, run the Jewels as their tour manager, or, the Beach Boys or something large like that? Or are you hoping to, you think you'd have a better opportunity to sort of getting your foot on the ground in an artist that's playing, 500 cap venues or something like that? If you have those kind of venues that are near you, I would go and spend time in those venues, talk to every single band and see if they have opportunity and a need. You're better off if you can find a way to help fill a vacuum, as opposed to move to a town where you're a little bit dime a dozen. If you move to Nashville, depending on your experience, are you the best option for what people are looking for? If you move to Austin, if you move to LA, if you move to New York, not so much the fact that though those artists and their business teams may be based out of those places, it doesn't mean, the reality is that they're touring all over the country.
Right.
So it's more about finding a way to get to the spaces that are going to ultimately host the artists that you are trying to affiliate yourself with. And again, it goes back to just finding ways to be part of it. Reach out to them on social media. Hey, are you looking for a touring person? And getting into touring, I know Nicole and I appreciate the questions. Since you're asking a bunch of questions, we can have some direct conversation here. What aspect of touring are you truly looking to get into? Are you trying to be a merch person? Are you trying to be a tour manager? Are you trying to be a tour photographer? Are you trying to be a sound tech, a drum tech, what is it that you're really trying to get into? Because some of that's going to drive what you're looking for. But I think at the end of the day, getting into touring has more to do with being present around those artists. And I don't think you have to be in a big city just to get there.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, in Alabama, I mean, there's depending where, but most likely you're probably close to Birmingham, Huntsville, Mobile. Hopefully not too far from those places. Right, and there's lots of venues and opportunities in those places. And Huntsville, I feel like is growing a lot. There's a lot of cool venues there, the amphitheater, and what was the place that we Mars Music Hall. They have like multiple venues in that one building, but I've done some shows there. So a lot of opportunities in the state of Alabama. So yeah, I completely agree. I always say I feel like a venue is the ultimate gateway into the touring world, because you're.
Well, I mean, and there's Tuscaloosa, there's Montgomery.
Oh, yeah.
Depending on where in Alabama you are, you're probably not that far from like Oxford or Oxford, Mississippi, or anything like that. And there are spaces that are in small towns, and one of the things that I think is actually interesting is I personally think it's a misnomer that you got to move to a big place in order to have the opportunity, because the reality is there's less competition in a smaller market. So when there's a festival, when there's a music venue that's opening, you're going to have a lot more stuff that's going through that area with less options. So getting into that venue and having those conversations is likely going to be something where your volume is going to be higher, and less things to compete against.
Yeah, and not just that, right? It's a musician friend or a songwriter friend that kind of gave me this analogy or idea, but someone that we both know, Emily, but she said she was really happy that she had a lot of experience and got a lot of reps before she moved to Nashville, because she felt like she should have just moved to Nashville with no experience in reps. She would have gotten lost in the whole songwriter world. And I feel like it's the same on the industry side. Like if you're on the business side or production side and you move to a Nashville, LA, New York, like it's just really easy to get lost when you don't have the experience yet. So it's almost better get it in the town you're in. Let me see. Nicole said, I would eventually like to be a tour manager. I'm new right now. Those are looking for assistant or coordinator roles to start.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I would say for tour managers is I know traditionally a tour manager is like the audio engineer becomes the tour manager eventually, because like how tours start. But I always say start in merch, because every band needs help with merch. Even if you're first starting out, maybe you work for commission plus tips on the merch. So then that's not as daunting on the bands. So you don't have like another salary on the road. Sure, it's another mouth to feed on the road, but if you offer to help for just commission and tips, there's a way you can create a lane for yourself. And then once you're in, I always say like box office. Like if you can learn how to read an audit and learn how to settle a show, that's a path for me, like for a tour manager. I don't know if you have a different path or any other thoughts on becoming a tour manager.
No, I mean, I would agree with all of that. The reality is those are places that you're going to spend time communicating with a tour manager, and even if you're on the venue side, maybe it's not the tour manager specifically that you're communicating with. Maybe it's an artist merch person on their side. You do merch for the venue, you're going to communicate with somebody from the artist team. You doing box office, you may or may not actually, it's good for you to learn how to do settlement. I don't know in the box office specifically how much time you're going to spend with, my box office manager doesn't settle our shows, right? I settle our shows. So, but still being a box office manager gives you the ability to be around it. And then you can certainly ask those questions like, hey, can I sit in on the settlement? When I was first learning, I started as at a venue here in town called the Neighborhood Theater, 1,000 cap venue. And I helped load in the bands. I helped load out the bands. I helped work security. I helped collect trash and throw it out. I helped, clean stuff, anything I could get my hands on. And all I asked for in return was an opportunity to sit in the office with the general manager, who also was a talent buyer, and just listen to conversations. Not necessarily asked to truly shadow him, on a day-to-day basis scenario, but just listen to the way he talked, just sit in the office and be present, and listen to all of that. And I wasn't paid. I mean, I was paid for, when I was working a show, but, I took my own time out of my own days to go in and sit with him and just listen, just basically be a fly on the wall, listen to him and his assistant talk about stuff. And he'd put me on, he'd put a call he'd be having on speakerphone and stuff like that, so I could listen in, and so on. But, I think being in the venues that you do have in your area is going to give you the most opportunity to talk to those artists.
Mm-hmm. And as far as getting started in a venue, I mean, since you also work on the venue operations and consulting side, what are some of the jobs there that people could look at, and what do venues? I mean, I don't know if you're part of the hiring process at all, but I'm sure you have a lot of perspective. What are some things that could stand out on a resume, right? Because we all start from zero. So, like, how do we get our foot in the door into a venue with no experience?
Volunteering, literally, which is what I was just talking about a second ago as well. And it's really truly how I cut my teeth in the industry. It's where I learned. And so when there was an opportunity for me to go and branch out on my own, this gentleman, Zach McNabb, was a huge mentor to me. And he was the guy running the neighborhood theater. But when I took over a space called the Double Door here in Charlotte years and years, and it doesn't exist anymore. But I was there for years, and when I was first starting, it was a 200 cap space. So that's where I sort of cut my teeth in the industry. And when I had questions, I would call him, and he was gracious enough to give me his time, even after I'd moved on from sort of like being the fly on the wall, I would call him when I had questions about stuff, and he was gracious enough to share his insight. At the end of the day, that insight is still just guiding language. It's up to me, like anybody else, to make the decisions on how they want to treat any particular scenario. But I think volunteerism is, if you do not have much on your resume, that's where you get your foot in the door. That's when you can show, your work ethic. Like, no, I'm not getting paid for free, but I showed up for every shift. Or I'm sorry, I'm not getting paid, I'm working for free, but I showed up for every shift. And when I was there, I didn't complain about anything. In fact, I embraced the opportunity to learn as much as I can about whatever that particular job is. One of the things when I take on a new client, venue or festival, especially if there's existing staff there, I always sit down with them, and I do it as a collective. And I sit down and I say, what's everybody's number one goal? And then before I give them a chance to answer, I always say, our number one goal is to produce a really great show, right? Does anybody disagree with that? And 99% of the time, everybody raises their hand and they're like, yes, of course we agree with that. Great. Then every single person's job in this room is just as important as anybody else. I don't care if you're doing trash. I don't care if you're doing parking. I don't care if you're doing box office. I don't care if you're doing programming. That means while you're doing your job, I can do my job. I don't have to think about doing your job because you're doing it, right? So it takes all of us as a collective to get any particular show put together, and done. And so if you are a volunteer and you're learning how to do trash, and you're learning how to do security, and no volunteer should be security, but you're learning how to scan tickets at the door, and you're learning how to load in bands, and you sit in on settlements, and you do all of those kind of things, and you show an eagerness, I think that's where you really get into doing, creating your own opportunity.
100%.
But I obviously, can you get in there? That would be great. But volunteerism, I think, is the place to start.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Comment from Catherine Tara on LinkedIn. So thank you, Micah, for your time. Beyond networking, what is the best advice for aspiring music industry professionals? I'm trying to transition into management as a previous performer. I'm finding it hard to get my foot in the door, but I have also worked as an event assistant. I'm trying my hardest to stay in the entertainment space, since that's always been what I'm most passionate about. So a performer trying to get into the business side of the industry.
So one, I'd ask you, have you made a list, since you were a performer and you're trying to get into management, have you made a list of all of the things you wish you had somebody doing for yourself? Have you taken the time to sit down and think about where were you, where are you in your performance aspect of your career? Be mindful of what is the true space that you exist in. Every artist wants to be making a living. Every artist wants to be famous, all of that, right? But you need to understand truly where is the space that you fill in the industry in your current format, and not trying to overreach and everybody wants to open for somebody else, so on and so on, right? But what are the opportunities that somebody that you wish you had? If somebody was giving you advice, if somebody was in your corner as management, what were all the things that you wish you had advice on? The reason why I ask you those questions is because that way you have a better understanding of like what is the service you need to provide if you're going to represent other artists yourself.
Right.
At the end of the day, I don't think you have to be good in the music industry to necessarily be good at business management or artist management in the music industry. At the end of the day, you have to realize that you are a performer, good, bad, or ugly. And I hate to take the emotion out of it and the artistry out of it, but it's a business. If you can make a living doing it, then it's a business and you have to run it as a business. Right. And so you need to be thinking about that. A lot of it is now, I'll get to the event assistant, aspect of this in a second, but from a artist management standpoint, again, reaching out to every, look at your artists, Google see if you can find information on their website about who their management team is, reach out to their management team, ask them if they have any intern programs, ask them if they have any job openings, even if you're quote unquote in the mailroom or just an assistant on somebody's desk, going after whatever aspect, reaching out to every contact you possibly can to make sure that you have, turned over every rock, every brick, everything, to try and create opportunity for yourself. I think the most successful people in this industry have certainly done that. They've created the opportunities, so be in the venues, similar like we were talking about with Nicole, be in the venues, be around the artists, find the ones who need help and go, see if they are willing to allow you to help them with their career. Mm-hmm. On the event assistant, if you're trying to get into event management and that kind of thing, I would reach out to the people that you worked for previously as an event assistant and see if they still need help. They, assuming that it ended amicably, and see if they still need help and go back and jump back into that particular role if you can, and just see if there's other opportunities that they can help create. And even if they don't have any spaces, see if they know people who have spaces, and other businesses that might be able to create opportunities for what you're trying to do. Mm-hmm. Again, literally putting yourself out there on social media, literally putting yourself out there on LinkedIn, all of those things, making sure that you have your resume put together when somebody asks for it. You don't want to have to be like, yeah, I'll get this to you in a couple of days. You want to be able to be like, here's a link, make sure that you're putting your portfolio together in a clean, easy, transferable way, if that makes sense.
Yep. I'll echo all that. And then one thing I'll add, if it's artist, if management is artist management, focus on the management side of your resume more than the performer side. It's good to mention that you're a performer, but focus more on the business stuff, right? Just like knowing how some managers tick, because a potential red flag could be a performer potentially looking for a manager, but trying to just work their way in through another route. So just make sure you focus on the business side and why you want to be on the business side of it. And all the stuff we talked about earlier, learn some additional skills, and especially where you can offer some value. Like a lot of managers don't know about digital marketing. They know it's an area they have to get into, but the more you can learn about digital marketing, especially how to maybe even utilize AI, which is a taboo word for some people in the music industry, but learn how to utilize that and leverage that. Learn how to run ads on TikTok. Like a lot of TikTok's very popular right now, and maybe learning how to run ads on a platform like that. I always talk about the more marketing skills you can learn, or the more content creation skills you can learn. That's where most of the opportunities are in the artist management side. And my business partner always talks about back in the day, you took out trash and cleaned the bathrooms as that was your way into an artist management company. These days, you help run social media and create content. That's your way into the artist management side of the industry. So I was that down top. We have another question. Falgun, who's been here a few times now. I think he's joined all the AMAs. Wants to be a promoter in India, so all the way across the world. And he's been working on budgeting. So a lot of his questions in the last couple of weeks have been about budgeting and getting prepped for putting on his first event. And this is at it's a festival, but at 1,000 cap room. So it's a smaller space for a festival, if I remember correctly. But I want to hear you guys' thoughts on setting up stalls for F&B at a first-time festival, as a first-time festival promoter, some tips you might have.
Well, I wouldn't mind a little bit more elaboration on that question. When you're talking about setting up stalls, you talking about it's literally physically setting up a stall, or are you talking about, how many should you make sure that you have in conjunction, on or in relation to what your capacity is?
Mhm.
At the end of the day, to some extent, a lot of it, especially if it's a first time event, a lot of it is guesswork. You're going to put together, some of it's going to depend on like how big is your space, meaning like your event may be 1,000 people, but you could truly do 3,000 people in that space. So you could easily put up a super bar, which might be a 10 by 60 space that has all kinds of different spots at it, where people are slinging drinks, so because the best thing you can do is make sure that you have almost higher supply than you do demand. So that way your line stays short, which means you'll honestly sell more alcohol in the long run. You don't want to have so many bars that your bartenders don't make any money, through tips and things like that as well. So it's finding that balance, but some of this depends on what is your space, how big, what is the true capability, where is your, think about your crowd flows, your ingress, egress. You don't necessarily want it, you don't want your bars right next to your entry and exit points, because then you're bottlenecking a lot of those space. You want to be mindful of emergency issues and things like that. But you also want to be mindful of, where are you putting these things in relation to the stage? You want some of the stuff going to be towards the back because you're going to have a crowd towards the back, but you also want to create some opportunities, whether they be VIP experiences that have special bars that might have different assets, meaning like you can only get this level of brand. Instead of your well tequila, you've got your high end tequila, is in the VIP lounge, and you have a bar that's in that VIP lounge. And maybe that one's close to the stage. Maybe the VIP lounge is the one that's furthest in the back, but looking at where your crowd, your expectation of crowd layout is going to be, and make sure people don't have to walk but so far to get their drinks. Again, 1,000 cap, if that's what you're looking at, that's not that big of a space in the first place. So most of the places you're going to be able to put it are probably going to be just fine. But don't, especially if you're doing an event, make sure that you're also thinking about how do you restock the bars. And I mean that from a standpoint of access. If you're going to create, like I said, if without knowing the space specifically, if it's an indoor space, 1,000 cap, maybe they already have bars, maybe they already, you have limited space, but you need to make sure that you can get restocking product to those bars throughout the crowd, or throughout the show. So you got to get it through the crowd. What's the best way to do it with the least obtrusive aspect of doing that as well? So be thinking of that when you are looking at placement. And again, hopefully that helps a little
Do
bit.
you have a formula for, or maybe not specifically a formula, like an algebraic equation, but do you have a guidelines or anything for how many points of sale for bar for alcohol you would have, and how many food vendors based on how big the festival is or the event is?
Food vendors, I mean, when we do a 5,000 person event, we usually have anywhere from 4 to 7 food vendors, and a combination of certainly different types, but also dessert versus regular. And I think our formula, and I apologize, I don't know this off the top of my head, most of the time, and we haven't talked, I know, Chris, you and I have certainly talked about this over the years, but I'm a big fan of surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. And I am not, in order for me to run an event, I have to hire people who are experts in their specific field. And so I don't truly know the math on how many bartenders versus crowd, but I think we have an average of, I think it's 2 bartenders per 100 people, something like that. Or no, that's not right. I think it's 1 bartender per 100 people is basically what we're looking at. Yeah, I'm thinking about roughly our setup for my amphitheater. Again, ironically, they didn't have a lot of permanent infrastructure there. So we have to set up bars. They have 1 concession building, but it does not service that many people. So we have to set up 10 by 10 tents all over the property. And I think we have roughly about 50 to 60. If on a sellout show, we have about 50 to 60 people, bartenders.
Got it.
So
That ties well into Falco's next question. So surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, right? That's what I like to do too. When I have someone asks me like a specific audio, like I can find the production company that I want to work with, but if you ask me a specific question on I don't know, consoles and boxes and everything, I'm like, ask these guys because they're the ones
Yeah,
looking
yeah.
at it, right? But the other question he has, I have a specific question for Micah as well. If you were to start over as a festival promoter with no credentials and network in a country like India, how would you go about doing that?
Um, I mean, I can only speak off of how I would. I've never lived in India. I don't want to make it about India per se. The reality is that if you are starting off from scratch, you have to understand your own personal market. Um, the reality is that you can get online and call anybody. You don't have any credentials. If you are trying to make sure that people in the industry give you the time of day, what I will say is don't do anything unless you've got money in the bank.
Yeah.
Have the opportunity to hire experts around you, like we just briefly mentioned. I'm a big fan of make sure that you surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. If you don't have a lot of experience doing something, find people in the industry that you can pay. Even if it relinquishes a certain amount of control, at the end of the day, you're paying them, so you still have all of the control from a standpoint of if you don't like what they're doing, you can ask them to change it. And if they won't change it, you can fire them. But find people who are like-minded like you, but have experience, and bring them into the fold of what you're doing. Going back to the aspect of make sure that you've got all the money in the bank, the reality is that in this industry, your biggest asset is your reputation. And good, bad, or ugly, no matter how nice of a person you may or may not be with the best intentions, if you can't pay people in this industry and on time, your reputation is not going to be worth anything. So I always use the example of if you're going to go start an event, whether you're going to be opening up a venue or you're going to be producing a festival or a concert series, assume that you're going to, if your budget is, let's say, $500,000, you're going to go to the bank, take out that money, go home, throw in a trash can, set it on fire. If your life doesn't change, then do your event. If your life's going to change, you're going to lose your job, you're going to lose your house, you're going to lose your family, all of those kind of things, then you need to reevaluate either your budget or what you're doing. And I don't say that like at the end of the day, like we jokingly in the industry say that the music industry is like legalized gambling.
Yeah.
And I hate to say that there's no safety net to it, but to some extent there's no safety net. So the best thing to do is do your best to have as much of your funding in place before you start spending it. At least 50% of it. You can certainly try and rely on ticket sales, but at the end of the day, you got to pay for the rest of it. That I don't know if that helps or not, but I guess part of why I was bringing that up is because if you start reaching out to industry professionals, and I don't care if you're reaching out to book an artist or if you are reaching out to work with a marketing company, or if you're reaching out to hire a site ops manager or anything like that, if you don't have the ability to pay them, then what you're doing, again, everybody's gonna figure that out quickly. You need to make sure, especially if you're starting, that you have the ability to pay people on time, and so on. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And when you say the industry, like promoting events is like gambling, that's what I say all the time. And the lucky thing is, it's not just, it's a little bit of luck that's involved when you're, especially when you're booking an artist, because you're hoping you're booking the right artist at the right time. You can definitely book an artist too early. I've done that, and then like 6 months later they blew up. But just make an educated decision, right? Like be aware of the genre you're seeing, like what are people coming out to, what are people supporting, like what is the market demand. Every market is going to be different on the types of artists you book. I learned very quickly then when I was working in New Orleans that if I wanted to book the early '90s cool, like I'll call it the cooler side of hip hop, the backpacker hip hop, right? That didn't work very well at all. But if I went more mainstream, stuff that plays on the radio, that did extremely well. Just like know your market, and just make an educated decision with ticket pricing, the venue, even the location of a venue is important. Like when I did the Cowboy Bebop stuff, like I didn't realize, but being in a major comic book anime market, it still mattered whether I was in downtown of that market or 20 miles on the other side of the road, right? And
Yep.
a drastic difference in ticket sales in the same market. But so yeah, know your market, know your audience as best you can, and just do some research on what the artists that you're looking to book and what else they're doing around the country or the region, so you know what the regional support. We're pretty much almost out of time, and so be mindful of your time. Do you have any other last words of wisdom? Most of the questions were geared around like how to get started, right? It's like, for people, any, I guess, last thoughts for anyone that's worried about getting their foot in the door or worried about finding a next opportunity or just trying to figure out how to navigate this crazy world?
Well, don't take anything personally.
Mm-hmm.
You know, at the end of the day, you were trying to get into an industry that is extremely emotional. It's all about music, right? And yes, we all love that and so on. One of my interns was actually asking me a question recently, was like, you know, you do this for the music, right? And I was like, honestly, no. Do I love music still? 100%. I wouldn't be in this industry if I didn't. But I don't do what I do anymore for the music. I do it because the reality is when we're working an event, we normally don't get to see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The passion that drives me for it is when we get to the finish line, and I don't care if we have 500 people or we have 5,000 people at an event. Being able to stand on the side of the stage and just look out of the crowd and see all of these people who have come together and enjoyed themselves. They've put all of their nonsense, their differences, all of that stuff is stopped at the door, and they've come out just to have a good time, and us being able to create an opportunity for them to be able to do that is what really drives me. That ability to sort of share joy, if you will, with other people at something that we've helped create, is what really drives me to do it. So you got to figure out what's driving you in this industry, but you still have to realize that this is all work. It's all a job. Will you 100% make lifelong friends, such as you and me, that you're going to be friends with for years, and it doesn't matter how often you do or don't talk, you can pick right back up where you were last time and so on. But you have to find something, you have to figure out something that's passionate about it and still be able to separate the business from the personal.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of business that's discussed, so don't take it personally, and be okay with the opportunities be thankful for the opportunities that are in front of you. Don't try and grow and focus on, I think when you focus too much on the future and too much on what other people are doing, you lose the ability to be present in the moment, and you spend more time on envy than you do on thankfulness, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. So I would just try and remind everybody that as they're getting started, don't lose yourself in this, and focus on mental health just as much as you focus on physical, and emotional health, because this industry will chew you up and spit you out for sure. Don't let it.
Yeah. And and I'll end on it's funny how I always, so I guess before I didn't have my sign off, but we're in the industry of making people happy, right? So if you're trying to figure out like what is your purpose in all this, yes, we're not saving lives, we're not delivering babies, right? There's definitely jobs out there that are more important, but I feel like our world is also extremely important because we, as you mentioned, we bring people together and they leave their differences at the door, and we're in the industry of making people happy. And I don't know, outside of being saving lives and things like that, what greater purpose than that? So I'm literally thinking about changing my way I end the conversations. I used to say spread love, positivity, and kindness in the world, but maybe lead with kindness, be mindful of others, and continue bringing joy to people through entertainment.
Yeah, it's a good way to be.
Yeah. Thanks so much for doing this. This was awesome. And,
absolutely.
Thanks everyone for all the great questions.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Yeah. All right.